Good afternoon and welcome to the WikiLeak-a-Day Show. This is December 23rd, 2010. I'm your host, George Donnelly. You can find the recorded versions of this show at armyourmind.com about an hour or so after the show is done. Today we're on livestream.com/leak-a-day. And let's get started with the first leak, which has the reference ID 04 Wellington 605. With this ID number, you can find other conversations about this leaked diplomatic cable. It was created in 2004 from the U.S. Embassy in New Zealand. Subject: New Zealand imposes strict constraints on diplomatic relationship with Israel in wake of spy scandal. This is kind of interesting. Israeli citizens X and Y were sentenced to 6 months in an escalating diplomatic row. These two men were sentenced July 4th by the High Court of New Zealand to 6 months in jail on charges of trying to obtain a false New Zealand passport. Government of New Zealand has not pursued allegations that the men are agents of Israeli intelligence agency Mossad. But later in the cable, it seems pretty obvious that they are. While Prime Minister Helen Clark would not confirm which service employed the men, she noted, quote, "If one were to lay espionage charges, one would have to be prepared to offer the kind of evidence in court which our intelligence agencies don't like coming forward to display. We have very strong grounds for believing these are Israeli intelligence agents," unquote. Interesting. Further down, Prime Minister Clark suspended high-level contact with Israel and announced a range of diplomatic sanctions, including placing Ministry of Foreign Affairs and trade officials under quote-unquote strict constraints in their contact with Israelis. Clark justified her actions by stating, quote, "The Israeli agents attempted to demean the integrity of the New Zealand passport system. The Israeli government was asked for an explanation and an apology 3 months ago. Neither has been received," unquote. Of course, no one should have to beg permission to travel in the form of getting a passport. It's absolutely ridiculous. We have a right to travel, every human being innately. You don't have a right to travel in somebody else's airplane or car or boat or whatever, but you have a right to travel, and there's no reason why this government gang should be getting in people's ways. Of course, it's curious to see Mossad tripping over its own feet here. Let's see. Israeli Foreign Minister Silvan Shalom responded via radio saying, quote, "We are sorry about this matter. It will be dealt with and all will be done to restore Israel's long history of good relations with New Zealand," unquote. Clark, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, refused to accept this apology. In a separate but possibly related incident, a Jewish cemetery in Wellington was vandalized and headstones were desecrated. Clark condemned the attack. I don't know why that should be related, possibly. On to our next quote. Again, another one from New Zealand. 04 Wellington 647 from 2004. Subject, this is a little bit of a laugh. New Zealand minister hosts Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11 fundraiser. Almost. Yeah, because the embassy, the U.S. ambassador there put a stop to it. Embassy Wellington learned July 30th that Government of New Zealand Cabinet Minister for the Environment, Marion Hobbs, was reportedly hosting a special screening of Michael Moore's controversial movie, Fahrenheit 9/11, as a local Labour Party fundraising event. DCM contacted Prime Minister's office to ask whether it could shed some light on the matter. What light is there to shed? I mean, it's a decent movie. Why shouldn't they show it to people? And was told by Prime Minister Office staff that they were not aware of the issue but would look into it. DCM, which must be the embassy, then contacted Minister Hobbs' office, but the minister's office declined to make her available to discuss the matter. Hobbs' staff later informed the embassy that Hobbs would not be hosting the fundraiser. However, she would be attending the event. So just changed who's the host and who's attending. But, it seems like kind of a storm in a teapot here. There's a reason this particular minister is nicknamed, this is the comment from the embassy staff. There's a reason this particular minister is nicknamed Boo Boo Hobbs. Nice little dig there. That said, it is probable that this potential fiasco may only have been averted because of our phone calls. It is apparent to us that neither the minister nor anyone else in the Labour government seems to have thought there was anything wrong with the senior minister hosting such an event. What is wrong with it? Ambassador will use a scheduled meeting with the Prime Minister to tell Clark of the near-instantaneous press queries for U.S. government comment in this matter, and remind her we would really rather not get dragged into internal New Zealand political issues. Well, it sounds like you dragged yourself into it, buddy. Is that the most important thing that that has to be touched on in U.S. New Zealand relations, really? All right, next comment, 06, San Salvador 4007. That's the reference ID with which you can find other conversations about it. From 2006. Oh, and this is a beauty. Update on McDonald's contractual dispute. U.S. Embassy in El Salvador again and again and again goes to bat in a legal dispute for McDonald's. On December 7, 2005, an appeals court ruled that McDonald's had illegally terminated its contract with the local franchisee on July 1, 1996, and therefore owed him $24 million in losses and damages. McDonald's is appealing the decision, but the composition of the chamber that would hear the case makes it unlikely that justice will be served. On February 10, McDonald's corporate representatives outlined for the ambassador the company's strategy to pressure the Salvadorans to ensure a fair hearing by linking the case to CAFTA DR implementation, and approach the ambassador, who is clearly a little bit more tactful, suggested would be counterproductive. They also outlined efforts to convince Salvadoran government officials the importance that the case gets a fair hearing. This case has been going on for 10 years. McDonald's people have briefed the U.S. ambassador there in El Salvador multiple times on it, it seems. Apparently, 2 neutral judges have recused themselves because they've been involved before. Another judge is a quote-unquote FMLN partisan. That's probably one of the political parties there, probably a leftist. And they think that this person just is not going to give McDonald's a fair shake. I believe there's even something here about the ambassador pressuring the government of El Salvador directly, saying it's extremely interested in seeing the case decided fairly. He raised the issue with the ambassador and advised him to speak to the president of El Salvador to impress upon him the importance of the case. Disgusting. Let's see. Next. 10. Basra 1. That's the reference ID from January of this year, 2010. Subject. Foreign security firms adapt to changing conditions. The Blackwater and these other private security firms, they just don't want to see these white faces, it says in the cable there anymore, walking around armed to the teeth and possibly ready to kill civilians. So they're being forced to hire more Iraqis and put these people out into the field. Since 2003, prominent foreign security companies such as Control Risks, Aegis, and Olive Group have been a familiar and prominent presence in Basra. Their armed convoys and heavily armed Western security guards protect and escort foreign companies and foreign government clients to appointments and site visits. Many, if not all, international oil companies employ them. However, the composition and bottom line of many security firms are changing due to improved security and greater competition, an increasing Iraqi workforce, and the government of Iraq and public's desire to see fewer armed Westerners on their streets. Sounds like the free market at work. They don't want to see them there, so get out and, if you got to provide this kind of service there, hire Iraqis to do it. Of course, there's also pressure from the Iraqi government there, which, while comprehensible, completely understandable, may not be entirely appropriate For example, here's the cost of one. To escort a single executive for a 4-hour round trip from COB Basra to South Oil Company costs around US $6,000. And the cable seems to be complaining about the high cost of these mercenaries. Let's see. According to XXX, the government of Iraq is anxious to, quote-unquote, get rid of all the white faces carrying guns, unquote, in their streets. Many local security company reps openly acknowledge that a more, quote-unquote, Iraqi face is safer as well as it draws less attention. Apparently this is in retaliation for the Blackwater verdict. And here's the real gem of the cable. I just love this one. Yeah, this is, file this one under pot, meat, kettle. Halliburton Iraq country manager decried a quote-unquote mafia of these companies and their quote-unquote outrageous prices, and said that they also exaggerate the security threat. Apart from the high costs for routine trips, he claimed that Halliburton often receives what he says are questionable reports of vulnerability of employees to kidnapping and ransom. He said that he recently saw an internal memo from the security company which tasked its employees to emphasize the persistent danger faced by IOCs, their personnel. Poor Halliburton. Somebody's ripping him off. Good. Less money for Halliburton. Good. And our last cable is 10 Madrid 179 from February of this year, 2010. Subject, why can't you guys just leave Spain and their intellectual property stuff alone? I mean, nag. I mean, almost every show we've done has had something about the U.S. nagging the Spanish government to crack down on so-called piracy. Just copying. Copying is not theft. Spain, intellectual property rights. Assistant U.S. Trade Representative Wilson's meetings with Government of Spain opposition private sector. During a February 4 and 5 visit to Madrid, Assistant U.S. Trade Representative for Europe met with government officials, private sector representatives, and an opposition politician to discuss U.S. government concerns over internet piracy in Spain and the government's legislative proposal. Content industry representatives described in some detail how piracy is hurting their business. They support the government's proposal as a step in the right direction, but are unanimous that further action is required. The rights holders are very concerned that the opposition Popular Party may defeat or hold up the legislation for political gain and urge the U.S. government to continue to reach out to the Popular Party on this issue. Go Popular Party! On the government side, State Secretary Ross and DG Corral underscored the government's commitment to get the legislation passed, but asked for U.S. government help not only with the Popular Party, but with two smaller parties whose votes could affect the outcome. Wine. Music producers of Spain, Sony Computers expressed concern. The government's initiative will leave much peer-to-peer activity undisturbed because they don't want to go after individual users as they've done in the U.S. because that's just ridiculous and it pisses off too many people. Excuse me. The Spanish model, according to these whiners, is essentially a watered-down version of an earlier proposal by the coalition in negotiations with Internet Service Providers Association, Redtel. But Redtel doesn't want to talk to them anymore. Poor intellectual property license holders. If you have an intellectual property, don't pawn off the enforcement on the government. Pay for it yourself. Lock down your users with contracts if you like, and pay for the enforcement yourself. If you can get away with that, but don't pawn it off on the government. Okay, here we have an article from The Guardian. Bradley Manning supporters went to the UN, and the UN is now going to investigate the charges of torture. They were investigating a complaint on behalf of a Bradley Manning supporter. The Office of Manfred Nowak, he's a special rapporteur on torture based in Geneva, received a complaint from a supporter because they say that he is in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day, which even one of these army manuals says is a form of torture. The Pentagon denies he's being mistreated, but, you know, if you can believe them, I got a bridge for sale for you. BradleyManning.org. This is the center of the Bradley Manning Support Network. And here are some ideas on how to get the word out and how to contact the people holding him prisoner in Quantico, Virginia. So please follow up with that. The link will be on our website, armyourmind.com, so you can follow up, stand up for Bradley Manning. Assange says, Republicans, Democrats, Fox News conducting terrorism. Kind of funny. You know, we see people saying he should be assassinated. You know, is that terrorism? Might be. Even Sarah Palin. Assange is Le Monde's Man of the Year. Le Monde is the French newspaper. Go Le Monde. All right. Time. Go jump in a lake. So that's our show for today, and you can find the recording at armyourmind.com. Thanks for watching. We'll be here tomorrow again at 12:05 p.m. Eastern Time. And you have a great day. Merry Christmas if I don't see you again before Christmas.